What's going on, guys? Mega Gig back with another video. We are taking a look at our Barbarian Whirlwind build again today. We're not doing the speed build, and I'm not doing an actual build video for 2.6 because essentially the build has not changed. However, I do still get questions about some things, and so I thought I would go ahead and do kind of an update slash analysis video of skills you do and don't want to be using, some of the more common things that people like to do and then they have trouble pushing higher, because I'm always getting questions. And of course, after this video, that doesn't mean don't ask questions, but I'm always getting questions about certain things, and so I thought I would just address some of these things in a video. The first thing we're going to go over is the gear. Really, there's not a whole lot in this that's negotiable if you're wanting to push high. If you're wanting to get into the mid 70s, you can swap out Convention of Elements for a Unity, but if you want to push much higher than that, you're going to need a Convention of Elements, and the other ring pretty much has to be a Zodiac ring. And then in the cube, you're going to need a Skull Grasp as well. You're going to need a combination somehow or another of these three rings, with one of them being in the cube. It's pretty much non-negotiable. Another thing that gets asked is bracers. There's really only two viable options for the Whirlwind build, and I still like the Nemesis bracers. I'm still tough enough that I'm not dying. I'm not getting one shot very often. And so the Nemesis bracers really help you, especially if you get a rift that isn't super good. And if you do get a rift that's super good, and then you also get some shrines popping up, then the Nemesis bracers are really going to help out in spawning an enemy champion elite pack. And yeah, as long as the stats are pretty decent, Nemesis bracers are a viable option. The other viable option is Ancient Parthan Defenders, and these of course come in handy to boost your overall toughness. There aren't really a lot of options outside of these two bracers, so you do kind of want to stick with that. Now, here is a popular one. A lot of people argue or debate back and forth the Bulkathos weapons or the Estevan's set blades. And in short, the Estevan set can do more damage overall because you have the increased attack speed and increased damage percent. As with the Bulkathos, you only have the increased attack speed. Now, of course, my weapons, my Bulkathos weapons, are ancients, and these are not, so it's showing a lot less damage, even if we take the the gems out of consideration. That being said, these two do have the potential to do more damage, and they technically provide you with a little more toughness as well, because you also get stacks of armor with these. However, that toughness can kind of be equaled out in the same way, I guess, if you want, with comparing to the Bulkathos set, because they also increase your movement speed during Whirlwind, which is kind of an indirect toughness buff. It doesn't actually buff your toughness, but it does keep you from getting hit more often, a little more often, from ranged attacks and things like that. Now, the Bulkathos weapons do offer a benefit of being a lot easier to manage your fury. They automatically increase your fury generation by 10. And then in the particular build I'm using, we're also using Weapon Master, which gives you 2 fury per hit. Essentially the same effect as Whirlwind Wind Shear, except it's double, but that frees us up to use Blood Funnel on Whirlwind, which really keeps us alive a lot more. So I opt for the Bulkathos weapons. That's not to say they are better. To say one of these sets is really better over the other, they both have benefits and drawbacks. The Estevan set has the benefit of more outright damage and straight up toughness, but they do require you to have an immense amount of density, because a lot of the top leaderboards are using this exact same build that I'm using, with the one change of using these swords instead of the Bolcathos weapons. And so maintaining Fury becomes a problem, especially when you're trying to maintain Berserker Rage so you can get your 25% additional damage at maximum Fury. So it really depends on the Rift, and it depends on how much maintenance you want to do to try and maintain your Fury while using these sets. Personally, I like the Bolcathos sets better, but I will eventually, sometime down the road, get an ancient set of these and see what I can do when they're kind of on par stats-wise. So, but that's kind of the analysis of that. Into the skills. The first skill we're going to talk about is Warcry. A lot of people ask if you can use Impunity. You certainly can. Veteran's Warning and Impunity, they're both really, really good. This one's a little more based on chance, but it does allow you to completely negate damage, where this just buffs your straight up toughness. So this is, again, kind of an indirect buff to toughness. I prefer Veteran's Warning because we're moving around a lot. We're moving really fast. But Impunity is certainly a viable option. One thing that people seem to do a lot, and then they struggle to push higher, is they use Ground Stomp. And they'll be using Ground Stomp, Wrenching Smash most times. And what Ground Stomp does is it smashes the ground, stuns all enemies within 14 yards, or if you're using Wrenching Smash, 24 yards, for 4 seconds, and pulls them to you. In theory, this sounds good, because you're stomping the ground and you're pulling enemies in and you're stunning them. And if you're using Ancient Parthan Defenders, that's also buffing your toughness a lot. The issue you get when you run into, or when you are trying to use Ground Stomp, sorry, I went to the wrong one there, is it takes you out of Whirlwind for a good second or more. It's like a second or a second and a half. It takes a very long time to cast when you consider that you're Whirlwinding and you don't want to leave Whirlwind. And in that time, in Greater Rifts, probably 65, maybe 70 and up, if you get hit once by almost anything while you're out of Whirlwind, if you've got projectiles coming in, if you're facing a elite pack and they have fire chains, whatever, it doesn't matter how much health you have, one hit outside of Whirlwind and you're dead. And so that's why I don't recommend Ground Stomp very often. It does sound good, but as long as it takes you out of Whirlwind, it's really, really not a good skill. Now, what I always use in turn is Threatening Shout. That's because you can use it outside of, or you can use it while Whirlwinding, and it doesn't take you out of Whirlwind. And I prefer the Demoralize rune. I used to use the Falter rune, but again, I've said this in the past too, I still feel like this Falter rune is bugged, because if you're in a group and you use this for 6 seconds, all enemies are supposed to take 25% increased damage. I definitely don't notice that increase at all. I've been playing the Whirlwind build for quite some time now, through all these patches, and I haven't noticed any difference at all in how long it takes me to clear a trash on, I don't know, we'll just say a Greater Rift 80, and then if I come back and switch out the Falter rune for Demoralize, the time seems exactly the same. I don't know if this 25% increased damage multiplies different than, say, the 25% increase from Berserker Rage. I don't know if it's an additive or it's multiplicative and it's just not adding up, but I just don't feel I don't feel the 25% difference. So I don't recommend the Falter rune. What I always use is Demoralize. This kind of takes the place of your Ground Stomp. It doesn't immediately bring enemies in, but it does taunt them for 4 seconds. And so if you've got enemies, let's zoom out here, if you've got enemies kind of all around, you can Whirlwind, you can taunt here, and as your Zodiac Ring is cooling this down, it's just going to be a few seconds. You can come over here and taunt here, and then you can just kind of settle in right here. All the enemies will just start coming in around you and dying, creating your own density. So I recommend the Demoralize rune, and I recommend having Threatening Shout on any number between 1 and 4. Now that brings us back to Warcry. A lot of people have the Ground Stomp on the left click, and I just said don't use Ground Stomp because it takes you out of Whirlwind. Warcry does also take you out of Whirlwind on the left click, but oops, I messed up the click. But it's for just a very, very, like, quarter of a second or less. Let's see if I can do it here. Yeah, see, you just barely stop. The damage mitigation from Whirlwind, you can see the 4-piece set bonus. You gain 50% damage reduction, and we're not worried about Rend. And then also in the cube, we've got our Mantle of Channeling, which gives us more damage reduction as we're whirlwinding. That bonus doesn't drop off in just the very quarter of a tenth of a second or whatever that it takes to cast this. That damage won't, or that damage reduction won't drop off. It drops off almost instantly, but you can cast this just quick enough where that damage doesn't drop off. You can watch the toughness there. Let's try again. And well, it does drop off, but it's so fast. The point is it's much quicker than Ground Stomp. Ground Stomp takes a whole second plus, maybe a second and a half, and in Greater Rifts that is just way too much. So I prefer to put I prefer to put Warcry on the left click because you're only going to be using this once every 120 seconds, whereas Threatening Shout you're going to be using not quite every 4 to 6 seconds, because you want your Zodiac Ring counting down on your Wrath of the Berserker too, and your Ignore Pain. But you use it fairly often. You use it, and then it gets on cooldown, and then maybe 6 or 7 seconds later you use it again because you're trying to keep the same density, and you're also trying to reduce enemies' damage. So that's why I have these two where they are. Now there's one more option that I wanted to go over, and that is Overpower. People used to use Overpower over Threatening Shout. And I think in it was 2.4.3, this skill I think got nerfed, or maybe it was 2.5. But basically, it says critical hits have a chance to reduce the cooldown of Overpower by 1 second. That got severely nerfed. It used to be a very good chance. You would be spinning around using Overpower, and it would be constantly adding stacks. Let's just go ahead and put it down here so we can where is it? There we go. So you can see where we generate up to 3 stacks. Now this got severely nerfed, and so before it got nerfed you could just constantly be casting cast, and it would just be refreshing, and it was good for a little bit of extra damage. And then you would also use the Killing Spree rune, which boosts your critical hit chance by 8%. Since then, Overpower has been severely nerfed, and it still cools down. It still has that chance to cool down by 1 second for critical hits, but they have lowered that chance significantly. If you choose to use this, you'll still be using the Killing Spree rune because you want to boost that critical hit chance, but it's really more of a buff now than anything. Personally, I've tested this, and or at least from what I have seen, Threatening Shout Demoralize still does better because it's creating density, and that overall increases your damage rather than directly increasing your damage from Overpower because of your Pain Enhancer. The Pain Enhancer, critical hits cause the enemy to bleed for a % of damage, whatever level you have, for 3 seconds. And you also gain Blood Frenzy, granting you 3% increased attack speed for each bleeding enemy within 20 yards. So your Demoralize is bringing your enemies in closer because you're taunting them, creating a lot of density, which is also creating more and more attack speed, which ends up being more overall damage than this 8% buff than you're getting from this. So this is essentially just a buff because that 380% weapon damage when you cast it really isn't enough to, not enough to really make much of a difference. So these are some of the misconceptions, or I don't want to say faults that people make, but a lot of times people will be trying to do some of these things. We've talked about some of the different things, and they'll be trying to push higher, and they just can't. And they'll say, you know, I have the same gear you do, but I can't seem to get past a 60 or whatever. And normally it's because something on their skill bar, they're using a skill that they don't feel like this skill set is going to provide the damage. Threatening Shout Demoralize, because of the taunt, creating density, allows you to do a lot more damage than people realize. It's not a direct damage buff, but it does reduce damage, and it also taunts the enemies. And again, creating density with a Whirlwind Barb is definitely what you want, because your Whirlwind is going to be keeping you alive more from the critical hits, and then you're also going to be gaining a lot of attack speed bonus from your Pain Enhancer with more density. Now, I did just think of one other thing. A lot of people like to replace Pain Enhancer for Bane of the Trapped if you have one leveled up higher. It is technically a more direct buff. It is more straight up damage, especially against just a few targets. But because you're missing that attack speed in bigger groups, you're not healing as often, you're not getting as many critical hits because you're not attacking as often, and you're not healing as often because you're attacking slower. And in turn, I have found that I die more. I have a Bane of the Trapped on a different character that's pretty close to this same level, and I've found myself dying quite a bit because of that lack of attack speed. So this is more or less the optimal build. It hasn't changed much since 2.4.5. There were, I think 2.4.5 had a few changes from 2.4.3, I think. I can't remember for sure. But since Whirlwind got its buff, it hasn't really changed a whole lot. And unfortunately, there's not a lot of diversity in this. The main portion of diversity is these two bracers and these two weapon sets. When it comes to skills, there's not a lot you can do. If you're really tough, you can swap out Warcry for Ancient Spear Rage Flip, and you can drag enemies along with you better than just simply trying to taunt them and have them follow you. The issue I run into with Ancient Spear Rage Flip is it doesn't work on a lot of bigger enemies, and it doesn't work on a lot of elites. And so I've found that a lot of times, in a lot of situations, unless the Rift is just perfect for it, I'm not using the Ancient Spear Rage Flip very much, and it's just cutting into the toughness that I could have. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I hope you enjoyed a rundown of the Whirlwind build. Probably won't be too many of these build analyses with other builds, because I just don't have as much experience with other builds, because I'm just a huge Barbarian fan, and I've really taken to the Whirlwind build. But we could probably go over maybe the Spirit of the Earth set as well. Yeah, but anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I hope it helped you out if you're having trouble pushing greater rifts with the Whirlwind build. And if you're curious, my current top run is 87. I'm on 88 right now, and I am Paragon 1037. I have most of my gear augmented, not all of it. These three pieces still don't have augments, and then all of my gear isn't augmented with like 70 stuff. A couple of them I've got a couple pretty high in the 80s, and then a couple of them are just in the 60s. So, so 87 is a pretty good spot. I'm tough enough. I can run. If it was unlocked, I could run because I've. Well, I don't know what I could run, honestly. 88, I've ran a couple. I haven't complete, but dying isn't really the issue. It's mainly damage. So if I could swap out to these, and it would be more damage if they were ancients, then I probably would, just to try and see if I could push higher. But weapons isn't really what's holding me back on damage. It's missing some augments. and just not having enough Paragon levels. If you go to the top barbarians right now, yeah, I am at 171. Woohoo! I've only run an 84 this season. 102. Let's see what Paragon. Yeah, 3,000 Paragon points. So, and you can go down the list and look, and a lot of people that are really, really high. Not all, but a lot of people that are really, really high have like 2,000 plus Paragon levels. So, if you're wondering why you can't push higher, it's probably because of some of these things we've gone over today. And then maybe if you're only Paragon level 6 or 700, more than likely you're not going to be pushing into the high 70s and low 80s for a while, because Paragon points, especially once you pass 800, do really add up. Once you pass 800, you've got all these max, and everything basically goes into strength. So a lot of times it just takes farming gear. You're going to need ancients, you're going to need good stat rolls, you're going to need augments. I've got almost all my gear augmented, like I said, except these 3. Yeah, that's even augmented. And almost all of it is ancient, except for, again, these 3. So if you've got all the same skills, you've got all the same gear, and you just find yourself not being able to push past, I don't know, just say 75, it's probably because you don't have enough augments, you probably don't have enough Paragon points, or your gear stats aren't high enough. Maybe you need ancient gear. But I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I hope it was informative. I hope it helps you out in some way. If you feel like I've forgotten anything or you have questions about something else, feel free to ask in the comments down below. Like the video and subscribe if you want to see more. Thanks, guys, and more good stuff to come. Oh, wait, one more thing. If anybody's still sticking around, how did you like the new intro? Did you like it? I'm not sure if I'm sold on it yet or not. But anyways, guys, till next time.